The night was quiet. Too quiet for Oak Ridge County. An old pickup rolled along the edge of Route 27 taillight. Busted engine growling like it hadn't been serviced in years. Inside, behind the cracked windshield and a pair of weathered hands on the wheel, sat a man who didn't look like trouble. He looked like he belonged to a different time. Boots, scuffed beard, like smoke eyes that had watched too many things burn. Two patrol cars lit up the road in red and blue, slicing through the stillness. The truck pulled over. No fuss, just obedience. Officer Danvers stepped out first. Already annoyed. Officer Hale followed, hand near his hip, eyes locked on the driver's silhouette. They thought it'd be routine. A citation, maybe a lecture. But in less than 30 minutes, they'd wish they'd never pulled that man over. Because by then, the FBI would be at their door. The gravel crunched under the tires as the old truck came to a stop just past the county line. Oak Ridge didn't get much excitement, especially not on Tuesday nights, but Officer Danvers liked to keep busy. A busted taillight, no signal on a lane, changed just enough to justify the stop. "Stay in the car," he muttered to his partner. Officer Hale, as he adjusted his belt and stepped into the glow of his headlights. The pickup sat low on its axles, its red paint faded into a dull, rust orange. On the back bumper, a peeling army decal curled like dead skin. Danvers approached the window slowly, hand grazing his holster, more out of habit than fear. Inside, the driver didn't move fast. He didn't speak either. He just rolled down the window with a soft groan of metal and looked up. His face was lined deep creases like fault lines carved by time. His skin was dark, his beard patchy gray like storm clouds. But his eyes, they didn't dart like most folks pulled over. They just stared slow and steady like he'd already measured the whole situation before. Danvers even said a word. "License and registration." "Yes, sir," the man said, voice gravel and molasses. Calm, unbothered, "It's in the glove." "Move slow." Danvers warned, no surprises. The man nodded once and reached across with a deliberate, practiced motion. No hesitation, no panic, just patience. Officer Hale had stepped out by then, circling around to the passenger side, hand near his sidearm. "You know why we stopped you," he called out. "Tail light," the man said plainly. "Been meaning to fix it, got the part, just not the time." Danvers took the paperwork and studied it. Name Walter E. Banks, clean record, registered vehicle insurance in order. But something still tugged at him. Not the name, not the truck. It was the stillness, the silence, the way the man didn't flinch, didn't explain, didn't try to charm or argue like most people did. "You?" Military Hale asked, eyes catching on the frayed jacket draped across the seat. Camouflage old-style patches faded from green to gray. Banks nodded once. "Used to be." "What branch?" "Army reconnaissance." Danvers smirked. "That right where at?" "Thailand, Honduras." A long time ago. He didn't boast, he didn't blink, just listed them like weather reports. Danvers handed the papers to Hale and leaned in slightly. "Pop the glove box for me." Banks hesitated. "Mind telling me what you're looking for?" "Routine check." Another pause, then a low sigh. "There's a sidearm in there." "Military issue registered." Danvers's voice stiffened. "You didn't mention that. You didn't ask." That was the moment something changed. Not loud, not fast, just tighter, like a string being pulled at both ends. Danvers took a step back. Hale moved in closer. Out of the vehicle, Danvers said, "Keep your hands where I can see them." Banks stepped out, slow movements, clean and careful. His hands stayed visible, palms relaxed. "It's not loaded," he said quietly. "It hasn't been for years." But Danvers wasn't listening anymore. Hale opened the glove box. The pistol was there, worn but intact, serial numbers still legible. There was a permit in the back pocket, just like Banks said. Still, Danvers didn't like how in control the old man seemed, how composed it felt, like being outplayed in a game he didn't know he was playing. "You got paperwork for this?" "Back pocket," Banks repeated. Danvers grabbed it himself. "Read it, legal." Valid still, he looked at Hale, gave the signal. "Put your hands behind your back." Banks didn't argue, didn't resist. But just before the cuffs clicked, he said something that stuck. "This ain't about the gun you're cuffing me because I make you nervous." Danvers didn't answer. Couldn't, because maybe, just maybe, the old man was right. The cuffs weren't tight. Not yet, just firm enough to say, "You're not free anymore." Danvers clicked them in place, one wrist, then the other. The metal was cold against Banks's skin, but he didn't even flinch. just stood there like he'd worn worse. Hale circled back around, holding the pistol up like a trophy. "Got it," he said, Colt 45. Old as hell. Danvers glanced at the weapon so loaded. "Nope, chambers clean, safety on permit, checks out." Danvers exhaled through his nose. Still, he didn't like it. The gun, the calm, the way this guy didn't ask a single question, put him in the back. Danvers said, "We'll figure the rest at the station." Banks didn't resist as Hale guided him toward the cruiser. The back door creaked open. He ducked in without complaint. Just before it shut, he murmured something under his breath. Should have known the quiet ones always get checked twice. At Oak Ridge County Sheriff's Department, the air always smelled like burnt coffee and boredom. The desk light flickered. The floor tiles hadn't been mopped since last weekend. Banks sat on the metal bench and holding elbows on his knees, fingers laced back straight. He didn't pace, didn't ask for a call, didn't even look at the two officers joking behind the glass. Danvers typed lazily at the report terminal, "Name Walter E. Banks. Age 68, vehicle 86 Chevy CK." He paused, frowned. "Special Forces Recon Southeast Asia." "What is this?" His Dungeons & Dragons character sheet. Hale snorted. Old guy watched too many war movies. Danvers leaned back in his chair, popped a piece of gum in his mouth. "Yeah, well, he's got that. I've seen things. Stare. Makes people nervous." Hale walked over to the cell window. Watched Banks for a beat. "He hasn't moved since we got here. That's not normal." "You think he's one of those Vietnam burnout types?" Danvers asked. Hale shrugged. "Maybe still something feels off." Danvers tapped the keys again. No priors, no warrants. Clean record. That pistol's the only hiccup, and even that's legal. He clicked Submit on the incident report. Then something unexpected happened. A ping echoed from this terminal. Not the usual local alert. This one came from a deeper system, one with clearance locks. Danvers blinked, looked at the screen. "Priority notice," he murmured. "What the hell?" Another ping, then another. The system stalled briefly, then flashed red words rolled across the top. "Do not proceed. Hold for federal response." Before Danvers could react, the phone rang, line 3. No one used line 3. He hesitated, then picked up. Sheriff's Department Officer Danvers speaking. The voice on the other end was calm, measured, but no less commanding. "Is Walter E. Banks currently in your custody?" Yeah." "Who is this?" "This is Agent Langley, Federal Bureau. We're en route." Danvers straightened. "What's going on?" "Do not move him, do not speak to him, do not log further information, secure the scene. This is now a classified asset." Then the line went dead. Hale looked over. "Was that?" "Feds." Danvers muttered, standing slowly. From the cell, Banks hadn't moved an inch, but for the first time since arriving, he looked up. Just a glance, like he'd been waiting for that exact moment. And maybe he had. Danvers turned to Hale. "Get your bodycam footage. Lock the files, right now." "Why?" "Because something's wrong. Real wrong, and we just threw cuffs on a ghost." Outside, the sound of tires slowed on gravel. Headlights swept across the station's glass facade. 3 black SUVs. No sirens, no logos, just silence and the weight of something bigger rolling into town. Inside the cell, Banks exhaled quietly. He watched the red lights bounce across the holding wall, then lowered his gaze again. He wasn't smiling, but for the first time all night, his eyes said everything. "I told you, this wasn't about the gun." The first SUV didn't screech. It slid. Smooth, controlled, like it had made this drive a dozen times before. Then another vehicle pulled in behind it. Then a third. Inside the station, Hale leaned toward the blinds and lifted them with 2 fingers. He froze. Danvers." Danvers looked up from the terminal, still frowning at the strange red screen lockout. "What?" "We've got company." "Who?" "I don't know, but they're not local." The doors of the first SUV opened in sync. 2 men in black suits stepped out. Clean lines. No words. One reached into his coat not for a weapon, but for a badge. "FBI." Danvers swallowed. A moment later, the front door of the station opened, without a knock. Agent Langley didn't look around. He already knew the layout like he had studied the blueprints. His eyes were flat, unreadable. Behind him, 3 more agents filed in. No hesitation, no greetings. Langley went straight to the front desk. "Where is the man you brought in earlier tonight?" Danvers cleared his throat. He's, in holding. Langley didn't wait for permission. He started walking. Hale instinctively stepped aside. At the terminal, Danvers hovered his hand over the keyboard. Look, we didn't know he had a weapon. It wasn't declared. Langley cut him off without looking. You don't need to explain, but you do need to step away from that workstation. Danvers hesitated. Langley's voice dropped an octave. It wasn't angry, it was final. Now, Danvers stepped back. Another agent, a woman with clipped hair and a briefcase plugged into the terminal, her fingers moving in rapid taps, code scrolled across the screen. Files opened, bodycam footage appeared. Timestamp of initial contact, she asked. 2140, Hale said quietly. She nodded, clicked downloaded. Every second since then is now federal property. Langley added, if anything was edited, erased, or left undocumented, you will be named in the report. Danvers raised a hand. Hold on, what is going on? Langley turned. You've been holding a Tier 1 protected asset. That man's identity is sealed under federal statute. He should have never appeared in your system. The fact that he did means something's already broken. Silence fell. In the back, Banks still hadn't moved. His hands rested on his knees, his head slightly bowed. The flickering overhead light made his shadow stretch long across the floor. Haley looked through the glass. He's been sitting like that for 45 minutes. Langley turned to face him. That's because he knows exactly what's coming. Another agent approached Secure Link, established footage uploading. We have access to patrol dashcams, station cams, and cell audio. Langley nodded. Good. He stepped toward the cell, paused at the keypad. Danvers found his voice again. Are we in trouble? Langley looked at him, eyes narrowed just slightly. Did you mock him? Danvers didn't answer. Did you search him without probable cause? Joke about his record? Talk down to him like he was a nobody. Danvers glanced at Hale. Both were quiet now. Langley tapped the keypad. The lock clicked open. The door creaked. Banks didn't lift his head. Langley stepped inside. Sergeant, he said simply. Banks looked up. No smile, just a nod. Took you long enough. Langley nodded back. Traffic in the hills was a mess. Banks stood slow but steady. His knees popped, his spine held. Langley glanced over his shoulder toward the frozen officers behind the glass. They don't know, Banks said. I figured, Langley replied, but now they will. Outside, the last SUV door slammed shut. The night was still quiet. But inside the station, everything had changed. No more jokes. No more doubt. Only the sound of silence and the weight of realization settling on two uniforms that suddenly didn't feel like protection anymore. The cell door eased shut behind Langley with a soft click. Banks. No, Sergeant. Walter E. Banks stood fully now back, straight, shoulders squared. His age showed in the bones, but not in the presence. There was something enduring about him, like an iron fence left standing after the storm flattened everything else. Langley didn't speak for a moment, just looked him over as if confirming that, yes, this man was still alive. They handled you. Banks nodded slightly. Handled, not harmed. Langley turned toward the observation glass. Danvers and Hale stood there like two men watching their own trial unfold. Shall I brief them? Langley asked. Banks thought. Then shrugged. Better they know than stay stupid. Langley opened the door again, motioned to the agents. Let them in. Danvers stepped in, first shoulders. Stiff, Hale followed, avoiding Banks's eyes. Langley pulled a slim black folder from his coat and dropped it on the table with a soft thud. He didn't open it. Not yet. Instead, he looked at the two officers. Do you understand what a Tier 1 asset is? Danvers opened his mouth, closed it. Langley continued. It means this man's identity, history, and movement are protected under federal directive. His file doesn't exist in your system because it's not supposed to. But tonight it pinged. That only happens when a firewall fails. Wait, Hale said slowly. What firewall? Langley tapped the folder. The kind built to keep people like him buried. Danvers leaned forward. What the hell did he do? Banks finally spoke. I served. Everyone serves, Danvers shot back. Not like this, Langley said flatly. He opened the folder. Inside, faded photographs, redacted reports, satellite images, medals catalogued with serial numbers. Langley slid a photo across the table. A younger Banks, Same eyes, standing in the jungle rifle slung across his back, sweat-streaked and staring dead into the camera. Thailand, 1985. Langley said, recon extraction under Black Directive. A rebel camp holding 6 hostages including a child and 2 US journalists. He led the op, extracted them with no civilian deaths, lost 4 of his own. Danvers looked at the photo. Why haven't we heard of this? Langley's jaw flexed, because it never officially happened. Missions like his live in the shadows. They protect people who never know their names, and when it's over, the record disappears. Sometimes the men do too. He turned to Banks. Your last op was in 97. Sierra Leone, wasn't it? Banks nodded. Was supposed to be the last. Then came the standby. Danvers squinted. Standby. Langley hesitated, then spoke slowly. In 1998, Banks was assigned as a domestic asset in reserve, a contingency. In case of homeland breach, nothing ever came of it, but it was close. Close enough that his status stayed locked. Hull looked between them. So he's what, some kind of sleeper agent? Langley didn't answer. Instead, he reached into the folder again and pulled out a sheet stamped Pentagon Directive, eyes only. 3 weeks ago, he said, an archived list of covert operatives was leaked from a retired CIA subserver. Names, locations, code names. Banks was on that list. Danvers stepped back slightly. Langley continued, which means someone's looking for him. And if they found him before we did, this wouldn't be a conversation, it'd be a body bag. Silence settled in like smoke. Banks stood still, arms relaxed. So now you know. Hale cleared his throat. Why the hell were you driving around in a truck that barely runs? Banks gave a small smile, tight, bitter. Because hiding in plain sight is better than running. Because I stopped needing parades when I realized no one was ever going to throw one. He paused. And because after everything I did, after all the people I saved, I still get pulled over because I look like a problem. Danvers looked away. Langley stepped in. That's why we came, not just to protect him, but to protect you from what would have happened if the wrong hands found him first. You think tonight was uncomfortable? Try explaining this incident to a foreign court when Banks goes missing and a journalist has the footage. Another agent entered. All files secured, body cams, dash cams, audio upload in progress. Langley turned back to the officers. This is going in your record. Mishandling of a protected federal asset. Depending on what's in that footage, there may be disciplinary action. Danvers looked at Banks. I didn't mean... I know what you meant, Banks interrupted. His voice wasn't angry, just exhausted. You meant that I didn't fit what you thought safety looked like, and that's all it took. He reached into his jacket, pulled out a small creased envelope, laid it on the table. Inside his final declassified mission record, he slid it across. No one ever asked for this, he said, but I carried it anyway. Langley closed the folder and nodded at Banks. We've got to move, transfer teams waiting. Danvers stepped back as Banks walked past. No handcuffs, no escort, just presence. At the door, Banks turned. You don't owe me respect, he said, but you damn well owe it to the next person who looks like me, sounds like me, and has the patience not to knock your badge off your chest the minute you sneer. Then he left, and for a long time no one in that room said a word. The SUVs were gone. No flashing lights, no sirens, just a low hum fading into the night swallowed by the hills. And yet inside the Oak Ridge County Sheriff's Department, it felt like something had cracked open and left the air colder than before. Danvers sat at his desk staring at the incident report, still glowing on his monitor. The blinking cursor waited, but no words came. Across the room, Hale leaned against the filing cabinet, arms crossed, gaze fixed on nothing. Neither of them spoke. Mendez, who'd stayed mostly silent through it all, stood now at the front desk watching the door like she expected someone else to walk in. No one did. She turned and spoke quietly. Did you even ask his name when you pulled him over? Danvers didn't answer. He gave it. Hale muttered, we just didn't listen. No one argued. From the locker room, the sound of water running echoed faintly, someone washing their hands like it would help, like it could rinse off the shame. On the wall, the clock ticked, each second louder than the last. 2 days later, Internal Affairs sent a preliminary inquiry. It wasn't formal. Not yet, but the language was clear: unjustified escalation, inadequate protocol, failure to verify protected status. Hale was pulled from active patrol, assigned to clerical duties pending a full review. Danvers kept his badge, but it felt heavier now, like it no longer meant what it used to. He spent most of his shift watching footage. Not the news segment that aired a day after the event. He couldn't bring himself to see how they spun it. No, he rewatched the body cam. The moment Banks stepped from the truck, the way his hands never trembled, the tone of his voice never defensive, never aggressive, just calm. And then there was that one line he kept replaying over and over. "You're cuffing me because I make you nervous." Later that week, a letter arrived addressed to Deputy Mendez, handwritten on lined paper. The handwriting was clean, deliberate. It read, "You didn't owe me anything, but you paid attention. That's rarer than you think. Tell your officers, I don't want apologies, I want improvement. I've buried too many friends to waste energy on blame. But if they learned something, then maybe it was worth it." Webb. She pinned it to the inside of her locker. Said nothing about it, but every time she opened that door, she paused for a second longer than before. Danvers eventually wrote a report. He didn't defend his actions, didn't justify them. He simply told the truth, every word, every look, every moment of assumption that turned into regret. And at the bottom of the page he wrote, "He didn't ask for respect, but he walked in it." That was all. Far from Oak Ridge, at a small Veterans Resource Center, tucked off a dusty road, Walter E. Banks sat across from a younger man in combat boots and shaking hands. "I don't sleep," the younger vet said. "Feels like I left parts of me behind." Banks nodded once. "You did." Silence stretched. Then Banks leaned forward. "But they're not lost. You just have to go back and pick up what you're still strong enough to carry." The younger man blinked hard, said nothing. But for the first time in months, he looked someone in the eye. Banks stood, joints cracking. He picked up his coat. Before leaving, he paused at the door. Behind him, the hallway was filled with soft murmurs. Other voices. Other ghosts. And for a moment, he allowed himself a breath. Not relief, but maybe release. Danvers found him by the exit just before the last SUV door shut. Banks turned slightly, not surprised, not impatient, just present. Danvers didn't speak right away. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. Finally, he stepped forward. I didn't know," he said, voice uneven. Banks looked at him. "Quiet. That's the thing," he replied. "You didn't ask either." Danvers flinched like he'd been slapped. "I was doing my job." "No, Banks," cut in calm but final. "You were doing what you thought your job was. There's a difference." He stepped forward, not aggressive, just closer. "You didn't stop me because of a taillight. You stopped me because I looked like I didn't belong in your picture of who's allowed to be calm, quiet, and armed." Danvers didn't argue, he couldn't. Banks continued. "You weren't scared of the gun. You were scared that I wasn't scared of you. And when someone like me doesn't flinch you, assume it's a threat?" He paused, letting the words hang. "Where I come from, staying calm keeps people alive. In your world, it makes me suspicious." Hale joined them slowly. Hands in his pockets, guilt stretched across his face. "I made jokes," he said softly, "about your jacket, about your past." Banks nodded. "Yeah, I heard. I'm sorry." Banks held his gaze. "Good, now, do better." He looked between them both. "Do you know how many times I've been pulled over and had to decide if being polite was enough to stay alive? How many times I've had to make sure you felt safe even when I wasn't?" Neither officer responded. "You didn't beat me. You didn't yell. You followed the book, but you wrote between the lines in ink. I know too well. The doubt, the tone, the need to prove I was lesser just to justify the stop." He stepped back, letting the silence breathe. Respect isn't something you grant after reading a file. It's what you give when you look someone in the eye and listen even when they don't look like your version of safe. Danvers swallowed hard. "We messed up." Banks nodded. "Yes, but mistakes are human. What comes next is the part that defines you." He turned toward the car again, one hand resting on the doorframe, but then he looked back, eyes sharper now. "I didn't come here to teach a lesson, I came here to get home. You're the ones who turned it into a classroom." Danvers took a breath. "Why'd you let us cuff you? Why didn't you say more?" Banks smiled just slightly. "Because some battles aren't worth winning with noise, and because the truth always arrives. Sometimes with a badge bigger than yours." With that, he climbed into the SUV, the door shut with a solid, gentle thump. The engine purred. The vehicle rolled away, and Danvers stood still, heart heavy with the weight of everything he didn't see until it was too late. The next morning, Oak Ridge County Sheriff's Department looked exactly the same. The same chipped paint on the walls, same flickering hallway light, same coffee machine, wheezing like an old man. But inside, everything had shifted. The tone, the pace, the weight. The morning shift moved quieter. Less swagger, fewer jokes, more glances exchanged without words. No one said Harold's name aloud, but everyone was thinking it. Danvers sat at his desk, a blank notepad in front of him. He wasn't typing, just writing pen pressed to paper like it was the only way to slow his mind down. He was calm because he'd been through worse. We panicked because we hadn't. He read the line twice, then set the pen down. Across the room, Mendez flipped open a locker. Inside, pinned carefully to the door, was the letter Harold had sent her. The ink had bled just slightly at the corners, as if the words had soaked into the paper and stayed there. She didn't read it again. She didn't need to. Instead, she looked down at the sealed envelope in her hand. A new one, delivered by a young man who'd walked in just after sunrise wearing a gray hoodie and the look of someone with a purpose not yet his own. "This is for you," he had said, and now it sat in her palm. On the front, in the same steady handwriting, "Don't forget what silence can hide." Outside the station, the wind picked up slightly. Leaves danced across the pavement. A reporter from Channel 6 had shown up earlier that morning, hoping for a second-day scoop. She didn't get past the door. "We won't be commenting," Mendez had told her flatly. "But this is public interest." "No," Mendez replied. "This is human interest, and humans deserve privacy." The reporter left empty-handed, but not before glancing once through the glass, maybe wondering who Harold E. Banks really was. They'd never know. Not really. And that was the point. Somewhere outside town, miles from that cell, those cuffs, those flashing lights. Harold sat at a rest-stop bench watching the horizon warm with morning sun. No cameras, no questions. Just the quiet. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out the same old dog tags, worn and bent. He didn't wear them around his neck anymore, but he carried them always. He rubbed the edge with his thumb. Not like a habit, more like a memory. Then he stood, joints cracking one by one, and walked back to his truck. It still rattled when it started, still coughed when it turned over, but it moved forward, steady, stubborn, unbothered, just like him. He didn't ask for justice. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't demand headlines. All he wanted was to be seen for who he truly was, not for what they assumed. That night in Oak Ridge wasn't about an arrest. It was about a mirror held up to a system too comfortable in its patterns, too careless in its judgments. And in that mirror, we all saw something we try to avoid. How fast we reach for control when faced with quiet strength. How quick we are to mistrust what we don't understand. If Harold taught them anything, it wasn't about war or medals or clearance levels. It was this: some men carry scars you'll never see. The least you can carry is respect. If this story stayed with you, don't just share it, reflect on it, then look again at the next stranger you meet. And this time see them fully.